Who dropped this? Emma Carter whispered, staring at the broken security badge lying beside a shattered wine glass. The silver tray was still trembling in her hands. Red wine spread across the white marble floor like fresh blood. Around her, the VIP dining room had gone silent. 40 guests stopped talking. A manager froze halfway through a smile. And at the far end of the room, the Mafia boss looked not at the mess, but at the badge nobody else seemed to notice. 3 hours earlier, Emma had been standing in front of the employee restroom mirror, adjusting the black apron tied around her waist. The reflection looking back at her was familiar. Round face, curvy frame, tired brown eyes. A woman who had spent most of her life apologizing for taking up space in rooms built for people like someone else. Her right hand trembled slightly as she pinned on her name tag. It always did when she was nervous. 5 years after the bus accident, the doctors called it minor nerve damage. Customers called it clumsy. Managers called it a risk. Emma called it expensive. Every month she still made payments on hospital bills she couldn't afford. She slipped her old phone into her apron pocket and headed toward the dining room. Tonight mattered. The Moretti Harbor Club was opening its new private investors wing. Politicians, developers, old money families, men whose watches cost more than her yearly salary. Every table gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers. Every wine glass reflected golden light. Every employee had been warned not to make mistakes. Greg Harrison stood near the service station watching staff with the polished smile he wore when he wanted to seem reasonable. "Let's remember," he said smoothly, straightening his cufflinks. "Our guests expect a certain standard. Presentation matters. Precision matters. Perception matters." His eyes drifted briefly toward Emma before moving away. Some people have to work harder than others to meet those standards. A few employees lowered their eyes. Nobody said anything. Greg never insulted people directly. He preferred cleaner weapons. Emma picked up her tray and walked away before the familiar knot in her chest could tighten. Further, silence could humiliate just as effectively as words. By 9 o'clock, the dining room was full. Emma moved carefully between tables, balancing expensive bottles and crystal stemware. She knew every step, every turn, every blind corner. Her life depended on being invisible enough not to be noticed and competent enough not to be fired. At table 12, she noticed something strange. A man in a dark suit exited the employee hallway. Not unusual, except investors weren't allowed there. He moved quickly, clutching a gray envelope against his side. His head stayed down. Emma frowned. For a second, she considered telling security. Then the man disappeared behind a column. The moment passed, or at least she thought it had. 20 minutes later, she was crossing the center aisle carrying a tray of Bordeaux when the same man burst from the hallway again. This time he was running. He slammed into her shoulder hard enough to spin her sideways. The tray left her hands. Glass exploded across marble. Guests gasped. Someone shouted. The man staggered, caught himself, then crouched for a split second. Not to help. Not to apologize. To grab something from the floor. Then he vanished into the crowd. Emma dropped to her knees among the broken glass. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Wine soaked into her apron. The room was watching. Every eye, every judgment, every expectation she had spent years trying to outrun. Then her fingers brushed cold metal beneath the tablecloth. A broken security badge. His plastic clip snapped clean off. A tiny smear of blood stained the back. Not the front, the back. And somehow that frightened her more than the shattered glass. The smear of blood on the back of the badge shouldn't have been there. Emma stared at it for a second too long before a polished dress shoe stopped inches from her hand. "Step away from the glass, Emma." Greg Harrison's voice carried easily through the silence. Not loud. Worse. Controlled. Professional. The kind of voice people trusted. She looked up. He offered a hand she didn't take. Around them, servers stood frozen beside white tablecloths and half-finished conversations. Investors pretended not to stare. The room smelled of red wine and embarrassment. Emma pushed herself up without help. Her apron was soaked. A thin tear had opened near one pocket. She slipped the broken badge inside before anyone noticed. "Are you hurt?" Greg asked. "No, that's fortunate." He smiled politely toward the guests. "Unfortunately, the damage extends beyond personal injury." A few people laughed softly. Emma felt heat crawl into her face. Across the room, Luca Moretti sat exactly where he had been before the accident. He hadn't returned to his conversation. He hadn't touched the bourbon in front of him. He simply watched. Greg turned to the investors. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize. We hold ourselves to a higher standard than this." Then his gaze returned to Emma. "Please remove your name tag." The words landed harder than the collision. Her fingers hesitated. "Now," Greg added gently, "let's not create a larger scene." Emma unclipped the tag from her apron. The metal felt warm from her body. She placed it in his hand. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. 20 minutes later, she sat alone beside the employee lockers. The industrial dishwasher roared behind the kitchen wall. Steam drifted beneath the fluorescent lights. Her old phone buzzed once inside her pocket. A bank alert. $43.17 remained in her checking account. Emma closed the notification and opened the camera instead. She photographed the badge. Front, back, broken clip, blood stain. Then she zoomed in. A number had been etched near the bottom edge. Security access 2B. Not a standard employee badge. Footsteps approached. She locked the screen. "You should throw that away." The voice belonged to Noah, one of the younger bartenders. He glanced toward the hallway before lowering his voice. "Greg's asking questions." "About what?" "About whether anyone picked up anything after the accident." Emma's stomach tightened. "Anything?" Noah shrugged. "His word, not mine." He left before she could ask more. Something was wrong. Not maybe wrong. Not feel strange wrong. Wrong in the way a locked door feels wrong when you know you left it open. An hour later, Greg called her into the operations office. The room smelled like cold coffee and printer toner. Shift schedules covered one wall. Camera monitors covered another. Greg folded his hands on the desk. "I've reviewed the situation." Emma noticed a fresh receipt sticking from a trash can beside him. 2 coffees. One purchased at 8:47 p.m., the other at 8:48. Same register. Same employee code. Greg wasn't drinking coffee with staff tonight. "The footage confirms the incident," he said. "You lost control of the tray. Can I see it?" His smile never changed. "That won't be necessary. If it proves I caused it, why can't I see it?" A pause. Tiny. Barely visible. Then he leaned back. "Because not everyone understands security procedures." The office door opened behind her. Luca Moretti stepped inside without announcement. Greg immediately stood. "Sir." Luca's eyes moved once around the room. "Desk. Receipt. Camera monitors." "Emma, you reviewed the footage already?" he asked. "Yes." "Interesting." Luca looked at one dark monitor near the end of the wall. "Then why is camera 12 offline?" Greg's smile remained in place for exactly 1 second too long. It was the first thing Emma noticed. Not the question. Not the dark monitor. The smile. Like a man reaching for a door handle and finding nothing there. The operations office suddenly felt smaller. The humming servers along the wall seemed louder. The smell of stale coffee sharper. Luca Moretti didn't repeat himself. He simply looked at camera 12's blank screen. Greg cleared his throat. "Minor technical issue. Maintenance has already been notified." His voice sounded smooth again, but Emma caught the tiny delay before the answer. The hesitation of someone choosing a version of the truth. Luca nodded once. "When did it go offline?" Greg's fingers tightened around a pen. "Approximately 9 o'clock. Emma looked up immediately. "That's not possible." The room went still. Greg's head turned toward her. Not quickly, carefully. The way people look at something they wish would disappear. "Excuse me?" Emma swallowed. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself not to look away. Camera 12 was working after 9. Greg gave a polite laugh. "Emma, You've had a difficult evening. At 9:14, I checked my phone beside the service station. She reached into her apron and pulled out the old phone. The cracked screen lit her fingers blue. I remember because my bank alert came through. $43.17. The number had burned itself into her memory. The camera is visible in the reflection of the wine cabinet. Greg opened his mouth. Luca raised one finger. Not a dramatic gesture. Barely movement at all. But Greg stopped talking immediately. Emma unlocked her phone. Her gallery contained hundreds of ordinary things. Utility bills, grocery lists, photos of discounts at the pharmacy, evidence of a life spent counting dollars. She found the image. A picture she had taken of a wine order slip for table 12 because the customer requested a rare Bordeaux she didn't want to forget. She handed the phone over. Luca studied the screen. The polished glass of the wine cabinet reflected part of the hallway behind Emma. Tiny, blurry, easy to miss, but not invisible. A small red indicator light glowed from camera 12. Recording. Active. At 9:14 p.m. silence settled over the room. Heavy silence. The kind that forced people to listen to their own breathing. Greg folded his arms. That doesn't prove anything. Security systems sometimes experience delayed failures. Maybe. Luca handed the phone back. His tone revealed nothing. Yet he did not return it immediately to Greg's explanation. That alone felt different. Emma slipped the phone away. Her hands trembled slightly. Not from fear this time. From certainty. Something wasn't lining up. Her eyes drifted toward the trash can beside Greg's desk. The coffee receipt still protruded from the top. 2 coffees. 2 timestamps. 8:47. 8:48. Same register. Same employee code. She remembered who worked that register. Olivia. The hostess. Olivia had left at 8:30. Emma knew because she had covered the front desk while Olivia rushed out to pick up her son. Who was the second coffee for? The question escaped before she could stop it. Greg blinked. What? The receipt. Emma pointed. Olivia wasn't here at 8:48. For the first time all evening, Greg looked directly at the trash can. Just a glance. Less than a second. But Luca saw it too. Emma knew he had because his eyes shifted there immediately afterward. Nobody spoke. The pressure inside the office seemed to tighten another notch. Then Greg smiled again. Smaller this time. You're very observant for a waitress. It sounded like a compliment. It wasn't. Emma felt the insult underneath it. The warning. Stay in your place. Stop looking. Stop noticing. Luca turned toward the dark monitor once more. Pull the maintenance log, he said quietly. Greg's jaw moved. Once. Of course. Then Luca started toward the door. Halfway there he stopped. Not because of Greg. Not because of Emma. Because of something pinned to the shift board beside the exit. A printed service report. Camera 12 maintenance request. Filed at 8:32 p.m., nearly 40 minutes before Greg claimed the camera had failed. The maintenance report remained pinned to the board long after everyone stopped looking at it. Greg was the first to recover. He stepped forward, removed the paper with calm, practiced fingers, and folded it once. An administrative error, he said. The request was generated automatically. It happens more often than people think. His tone carried the quiet confidence of a man accustomed to ending conversations by sounding reasonable. Luca Moretti said nothing. That silence seemed to stretch across the room like a shadow. Emma had noticed something about powerful men over the years. The loud ones wanted attention. The dangerous ones wanted information. Greg slipped the report into a folder. Emma, I'd like a moment of your time. It wasn't really a request. 10 minutes later, she sat alone in a private conference room overlooking the harbor. Floor-to-ceiling glass revealed black water and rows of expensive yachts rocking beneath silver lights. The chair beneath her felt too expensive. The room felt too expensive. Everything about it reminded her she did not belong there. Across the polished walnut table sat Greg and a woman named Vanessa Price, legal counsel for the Moretti organization. Vanessa wore a cream-colored suit. That probably cost more than Emma's car. Her smile was flawless. Her eyes were not. A single sheet of paper waited in front of Emma. We understand tonight was stressful, Vanessa said gently. Nobody wants this situation to become larger than necessary. Emma glanced at the document. Incident statement. Most of it had already been filled out. According to the report, she had lost control of the tray because of anxiety and poor handling technique. The words sat on the page like a verdict. Just sign, Greg said. We'll classify it as an unfortunate accident. Emma looked up. That's not what happened. Vanessa folded her hands. We're not assigning blame. We're protecting everyone involved. By writing something that isn't true, Greg sighed softly, the way a teacher might sigh at a difficult student. Emma, sometimes accuracy and practicality aren't the same thing. The sentence landed harder than an insult. Outside the glass wall, harbor lights shimmered across dark water. Inside, the room seemed to shrink around her. She could almost hear every hospital bill she still owed, every landlord reminder, every warning she'd received about making trouble when you couldn't afford consequences. Vanessa slid a pen toward her. This protects your employment record. Emma stared at the paper. Then she noticed something. The incident time listed at the top read 9:03 p.m. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. The accident happened after 9:20. Greg answered immediately. Too immediately. The exact minute isn't important. Then why write one? Silence. Small. Sharp. Vanessa's smile faded by a fraction. Emma slowly reached into her apron pocket and placed the coffee receipt on the table. Then her old phone beside it. Then the photograph showing camera 12 active at 9:14. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't argue. Didn't cry. She simply pushed the items forward. Because somebody seems very interested in exact times. For the first time, Greg looked annoyed. The mask slipped for less than a second before returning. Vanessa turned toward him. Just slightly. Just enough. Across the room, the conference door opened. Neither of them had heard it. Luca Studin. The doorway. Not entering. Not interrupting. Just watching. His gaze moved from the unsigned statement to the receipt on the table. Then to Emma. Did she sign? He asked. Greg smiled. We're discussing it now. Luca nodded once. Good. Then he looked directly at Emma. Don't sign anything you know is false. Nobody spoke after that. And as Luca turned to leave, Emma noticed something neither Greg nor Vanessa realized she could see. The statement they wanted her to sign had been printed at 8:51 p.m., almost 30 minutes before the accident supposedly happened. The conference room remained silent long after Luca left. Not the comfortable silence of people thinking. The dangerous kind. The kind that made every tiny sound feel amplified. The air conditioner hummed overhead. Somewhere beyond the glass, a yacht horn echoed across the harbor. Greg was the first to move. He reached for the statement and folded it neatly. We're done here. His voice had lost some of its warmth. Vanessa gathered her files. Neither mentioned the print timestamp. Neither looked at Emma again, which somehow felt worse. Emma waited until they left before reaching for her old phone. Her hands shook slightly, not from fear, from the exhausting effort of staying calm. When she stood, something brushed against her shoe beneath the conference table. A small white rectangle, folded twice. She bent and picked it up. A receipt. Not from the restaurant. From a coffee shop 3 blocks away from the Harbor Club. 2 large coffees. 1 blueberry muffin. Paid at 8:41 p.m. The timestamp sat only 6 minutes before the incident statement had been printed. Emma almost threw it away. Then she noticed the name written across the top in black marker. Greg. Her stomach tightened. 20 minutes later, she stood outside the security office. The hallway smelled faintly of dust and electronics. Camera monitors glowed through the narrow window in the door. She hesitated, then knocked. The security supervisor, an older man named Raymond, opened it. Kitchen staff aren't allowed in here tonight. Emma held up the broken badge. I need to know who this belongs to. Raymond frowned. Where'd you get that? Near the
Accident.
He took the badge. The moment he saw it, his expression changed. Just slightly. Enough. That's odd. What? Raymond turned it over. This isn't active security. Emma stepped closer. What do you mean? This badge was deactivated 8 months ago. The words hit her harder than she expected. Then why was somebody carrying it tonight? Raymond didn't answer immediately. He checked a computer, clicked through several screens, then leaned back slowly. Because the badge belonged to someone who doesn't work here anymore. Emma looked down at the plastic card. The blood smear, the broken clip, the access code. Suddenly it felt heavier. Who? Raymond's eyes narrowed. Before he could answer, another voice interrupted. Problem. Greg appeared at the far end of the hallway. Perfect suit, perfect posture, perfect timing. Raymond immediately minimized the screen. Nothing serious. Greg smiled at Emma. You seem very interested in security procedures. The words sounded polite. They weren't. Emma held his gaze. I found something. I thought it mattered. Most things don't. Greg's smile widened. That's one of the more useful lessons in life. Raymond handed the badge back. His fingers lingered a fraction too long. A warning. Or maybe encouragement. Emma couldn't tell. Greg waited until Raymond disappeared into the office before speaking again. You know, Emma, people often make situations harder than they need to be. Sometimes. Especially when they mistake coincidence for evidence. Then he walked away, calm, unhurried, certain. Emma stared at the badge in her palm. Something about Greg's confidence bothered her. Not because he seemed worried, because he didn't. Like a man who already knew exactly what every piece of evidence would show. Her phone buzzed. An incoming message from an unknown number.
No greeting. No signature.
Just a single photograph. A grainy image of a security file displayed on a computer screen. Access log, camera 12. Footage missing 13 minutes. Authorized removal G. Harrison. Emma looked at the screen for a long moment. Then, for the first time all night, she saw Luca Moretti's face in her mind. Not watching her, but watching Greg. Emma sat alone in her apartment long after midnight, the anonymous photograph still glowing on her old phone. The television in the corner played with the volume muted. Blue light flickered across peeling walls and unopened hospital bills stacked beside the refrigerator. The apartment smelled faintly of microwaved soup she had forgotten to eat. Rain tapped softly against the window. For a few seconds, everything felt ordinary. Then her phone vibrated again. Not a message. A bank alert. Another automatic withdrawal for her mother's medical debt. Emma stared at the number and closed her eyes. This was what people like Greg counted on. Bills, fear, exhaustion. The quiet pressure that convinced ordinary people to stop asking questions. Her thumb hovered over the anonymous photograph. She could sell the story, threaten someone, ask for money. Instead, she opened a new message and typed only 4 words. I don't want money. 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Then a reply arrived. Good. Keep the badge. Across the city, Luca Moretti stood alone in his office overlooking the harbor. A single desk lamp illuminated stacks of contracts and personnel files. The rest of the room remained in shadow. His attorney sat across from him with a tablet in hand. Neither spoke for several moments. Luca was reading. Not the security report. Not the missing footage request. Personnel file. Greg Harrison. 15 years of employment. Promotions. Recommendations. Trust. Loyalty. At least on paper. Anything? The attorney finally asked. Luca turned a page. 3 missing files. From tonight.
No.
That answer was somehow worse. He slid several documents across the desk. Employee complaints. All closed. All dismissed. Different years. Different departments. Different supervisors. Same language. Operational misunderstanding. Documentation error. Employee confusion. Luca's gaze settled on one name. A bartender who had resigned 2 years earlier. Attached to the file was a rewritten shift log. Different handwriting. different ink. Same signature. Interesting, he said quietly. The attorney leaned forward. You think Harrison altered records before? Luca didn't answer. Immediately. Instead, he picked up the broken security badge Raymond had delivered an hour earlier. The blood smear remained on the back. The crack through the clip looked almost deliberate. He turned it over in his hand. Silence stretched between them. Then he asked a different question. Who owned this? The attorney checked another file. Former security supervisor. Daniel Mercer. Luca looked up. The man who disappeared from payroll 8 months ago? Yes. Reason for termination? The attorney frowned. There isn't one. The room became very still. A missing termination record. A deactivated badge. Missing footage. Altered logs. None of it proved betrayal. But together they formed a shape. The kind detectives noticed. The kind predators noticed faster. Back at the restaurant, Raymond sat alone in the security office reviewing archived access records. Monitor light reflected off his glasses. His phone rang once. Unknown number. He answered. Said nothing. A familiar voice spoke. Did anyone ask about Mercer? Raymond slowly looked toward the hallway camera. Empty. Quiet. Who is this? The caller disconnected. Across town, Emma's phone lit up again. Another photograph. This one older. Grainier. A payroll record from 8 months earlier. Daniel Mercer. Status. Active. Last supervisor approval. Gregory Harrison. Emma stared at the screen. At the date. At the signature. Then at the badge in her hand. And for the first time that night, Luca Moretti realized he had spent 15 years trusting Greg Harrison's reports while ignoring every report written by people beneath him. The next evening, the Harbor Club looked exactly the same. Crystal chandeliers. Polished marble. White tablecloths so perfectly pressed they seemed incapable of wrinkles. Wealth had a talent for pretending nothing was wrong. Emma stood near the service station with a folded order pad in one hand and the broken badge hidden inside her apron pocket. Around her, servers moved quietly through dinner service. Glasses clinked. Silverware gleamed. Somewhere in the kitchen, a dishwasher roared for a few seconds before fading again. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary night. Except nothing felt ordinary anymore. At 7:13, Luca Moretti arrived.
No announcement. No entourage.
He crossed the dining room and took his usual table. A glass of bourbon appeared in front of him. Untouched. As always, Greg noticed immediately. Of course he did. He approached with the relaxed confidence of a man greeting someone he had known for years. Good evening, sir. Luca glanced up. Greg. Nothing more.
No worms. No accusation.
Somehow that felt worse. Emma watched from across the room. She noticed something small. Greg adjusted his cufflinks twice before sitting down. He never did that when he was comfortable. 20 minutes later, Luca called for a private operations review. Managers gathered in the conference room overlooking the harbor. Greg, Vanessa, 2 department heads, security supervisor Raymond. Even Emma was asked to attend, which made several people visibly uncomfortable. The long walnut table seemed designed to remind certain people where they ranked. Emma took the farthest seat. Nobody offered a different one. A folder sat upside down at each place setting. Nobody opened them. Yet, Luca remained standing near the window. City lights reflected behind him. Simple question, he said. Let's revisit the incident. Greg smiled politely. Of course. Luca nodded toward Raymond. What happened? Raymond repeated the official version.
A service accident.
Equipment loss. Employee error. Nothing criminal. Nothing unusual. Greg relaxed slightly. Then Luca asked another question. What hallway did the collision occur in? Service corridor B. Greg answered immediately. Too immediately. Emma looked down. Service corridor B. The words echoed in her mind. The same answer Greg had given every time. Luca walked slowly around the table. You're certain? Absolutely. Good. He stopped beside Emma. What do you remember? Every eye in the room shifted toward her. The pressure felt physical. Emma could almost hear her own pulse. She looked at Greg, then at the untouched folders, then at Luca. The man came from corridor D. Silence. Greg laughed softly. With respect, Emma was carrying a tray. She was startled. Memory can be unreliable. Vanessa nodded. Trauma often affects perception. Emma expected that answer. She had heard versions of it her whole life. Too emotional, too sensitive, too distracted, too much. She reached into her apron and removed a wine order slip. Folded neatly, protected since the night of the accident. Table 12 ordered a Reserve Bordeaux at 9:11. She placed it on the table. I remember because corridor D is beside the reserve cellar. I was walking there when he hit me. Nobody spoke. Luca still hadn't opened the folders. Neither had anyone else. Greg folded his arms. That proves nothing. Maybe, Luca said. Then he finally flipped over the folder in front of him. The room followed. Inside was a printed floor map from the restaurant security archive. Corridor B contained no access route to the reserve cellar. Corridor D did. Greg's expression did not change, but one of his hands remained resting on the folder a second too long. Interesting coincidence, Vanessa said carefully. Luca nodded. Perhaps. Then his phone vibrated on the table. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The screen lit briefly. A recovered access log had finished loading. Emma couldn't read everything from across the room. Only one line. Corridor D access. Authorized entry. Gregory Harrison. 7 minutes before the collision. For the first time since this began, Greg looked at Emma instead of through her. And in that moment, he understood she was no longer sitting alone at the far end of the table. Greg kept his eyes on Emma for another second before looking away. It was a small movement, almost nothing, yet everyone in the conference room felt it. The balance had shifted. Not enough to break, just enough to crack. The harbor lights shimmered beyond the glass walls. Nobody touched the water glasses in front of them. Nobody reached for the folders. Even the air seemed heavier. Luca picked up his phone and looked at the recovered access log again. Then he set it face down on the table. Let's continue. His voice was calm. Greg straightened in his chair. With respect, one access record proves very little. I agree. Luca folded his hands. Which is why I asked for everything. The conference room door opened. Raymond entered, carrying a slim black flash drive. He placed it on the table without a word. Greg's expression remained composed, but his jaw tightened. Vanessa noticed. So did Emma. The tiny movement lasted less than a second. Raymond stepped back. The recovery team restored part of the deleted archive. Nobody spoke. The silence stretched. Luca looked at the flash drive for several moments before plugging it into the conference monitor. The screen flickered. Loading. A spinning circle appeared, then stalled at 47%. Nobody moved. Greg reached for his water glass. Stopped. Set his hand back down. 48%. 52. Emma could hear her own heartbeat. Then the video appeared. Grainy. Color distorted. But recognizable. Corridor D. 7 minutes before the collision. The room watched. A man entered carrying a gray envelope. Not unusual. Then Greg appeared. Not passing through. Waiting. The footage had no sound. It didn't need any. The two men exchanged the envelope. Greg opened it. Removed several pages. Slid a different set of pages inside. Then handed the envelope back. Nobody spoke. On screen, the man hurried away. Greg remained standing in the corridor, looking directly toward the reserve cellar. Waiting. Waiting for someone. Waiting for Emma to walk through. The video ended. Black screen. Silence. Real silence now. The kind that left no room for explanations. Vanessa finally spoke. There may be context we're missing. Her voice sounded smaller than before. Greg leaned forward immediately. Exactly. We don't know what was inside the envelope. Emma's fingers tightened around the edge of her chair. This was the moment. The moment people like Greg survived. Not by denying facts, By explaining them away, she reached into her apron pocket. Slowly, deliberately, then she placed a folded document on the table. The same document she had carried since the night of the accident. The paper she almost threw away. The contract copy she had found wedged beneath the service station after the collision. I know what was inside. Every eye turned toward her. Emma unfolded the pages. One section had been replaced. One signature page differed from the original. Archived version. The date. The property transfer amount. The approval language. Everything changed. Luca took the papers. Compared them to the digital contract already stored in the system. His eyes moved line by line, then stopped. The room seemed to disappear around him. For a long moment he didn't speak. Didn't move. Didn't even blink. Emma realized why. The altered contract wasn't simply fraud. The final approval signature belonged to him. His name, his authority, his company. Documents had been changed under his approval while he never knew. Years of trust condensed into a single sheet of paper. Greg spoke carefully. Sir, I can explain. Luca looked up. For the first time since Emma met him, he appeared tired. Not angry, not shocked. Tired. Like a man discovering a crack in the foundation of his own house. His gaze shifted from the contract to Emma, then back to Greg. How many? The question landed softly. Greg hesitated. What? How many contracts? Nobody breathed. Greg opened his mouth, closed it. Across the table, Emma realized something at the exact same moment Greg did. This was no longer about the tray, or the footage, or her. Luca removed the contract from his own folder and laid it carefully in the center of the table. Then he looked toward Vanessa without raising his voice. Call my attorney. No one left the conference room for a long time after that. The city lights remained beyond the glass. The harbor remained dark, yet the room felt different now, as if the truth had changed the air itself. Greg Harrison sat very still. The confidence that had protected him for years was gone. Not shattered, simply stripped away. One document at a time. One signature at a time. One lie at a time. Over the following weeks, attorneys reviewed contracts, financial records, personnel files, security logs, and archived complaints. The investigation uncovered altered agreements, falsified reports, deleted footage, rewritten shift records, and terminated employees whose complaints had never reached the people they were meant for. Greg was removed from his position before the month ended. Civil proceedings followed. Regulatory agencies opened inquiries. Investors withdrew support. The same board members who once praised his professionalism voted unanimously to remove him. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody defended him. The silence that protected him had finally turned against him. For Emma, the correction arrived more slowly, which somehow made it matter more. One morning she was asked to attend a staff meeting in the private dining room. The same room where her name tag had been taken. The same room where investors had watched her humiliation without saying a word. Every department manager was present. Every supervisor. Every employee who had worked that night. Emma almost declined. Almost. But she walked in anyway. The room fell quiet. Luca stood near the front beside Vanessa and several members of the board. A folder rested on the table. Thick, official, final. Luca opened it. The investigation is complete. His voice carried across the room. Calm. Direct. The original incident report was false. Nobody moved. Emma Carter was not responsible for the disciplinary findings placed in her personnel file. He turned a page. Those records have been removed. Another page. Lost wages have been restored. Another. Employee complaints that were suppressed are being reviewed independently. Then he stopped. Looked directly at her. Not over her. Not through her. Her. And this organization owes her an apology. The room remained silent for a moment. Then one by one people lowered their eyes. A few nodded. Others looked ashamed. It wasn't dramatic. It was real. The kind of apology that arrives when excuses finally run out. Afterward, Vanessa handed Emma a new personnel file. Clean. Corrected. every false notation removed, every disciplinary mark erased, her name written properly across the front. Emma ran her fingers over the cover without speaking. For years she had believed survival meant staying quiet. Now the truth sat in her hands, printed in black ink. Weeks later, another envelope arrived at her apartment. This one came from the Moretti Foundation. Not cash, not charity. A legal trust covering the remainder of her mother's medical debt, administered independently through a patient advocacy program.
No strings.
Attached.
No publicity. No photographs.
Just protection. The kind that could not be taken away by a manager with a clipboard. Spring arrived. The Harbor Club remained busy. One evening, after a long shift, Emma stood alone near the employee lockers. The building was quiet. Most of the staff had already gone home. She opened her locker and found a small box waiting inside. No note.
No explanation.
Inside was her original name tag. The same one she had been forced to remove. The same one she had hidden for years because of what was engraved on the back. You belong. But something had changed. The bent clasp had been repaired. Carefully. Completely. Stronger than before. Emma smiled despite herself. She turned and found Luca standing near the hallway entrance. Neither spoke for a moment. The silence felt different now. Not heavy. Not dangerous. Human. Thank you, she said quietly. Luca looked at the name tag, then at her. You kept telling the truth. Emma slipped the tag onto her apron. This time her hands didn't shake. No, she said softly. I just got tired of pretending I didn't see what I saw. Luca didn't answer immediately. He simply nodded once. Later that night, after the final table was cleared and the last glass polished, Emma sat alone near the kitchen with a cup of hot coffee warming her hands. Her old phone rested beside her. The hospital bills were gone. The lies were gone. The fear wasn't completely gone, but it no longer owned her. Above the service station, her name appeared on the employee schedule exactly where it belonged. And for the first time in a very long time, the woman everyone once overlooked no longer had to fight to be heard, because the truth had finally spoken louder than power ever could.